Hello and welcome folks, Wizuko here. And I know what you might be thinking after you read the headline. How can there ever be enough open world games? Can there ever be too much freedom? How can we get enough of something that is widely considered one of the best things that ever happened to games? How can big be bad? And I'll tell you exactly what I told this one guy trying to hit on me. It's not about the size, it's about how good you're using it. So don't get me wrong, I don't ever want to miss open world games forever. They are awesome. They really challenge technology. They let you experience all the freedom that you'd want, and open world games are immersive in a very specific way only open world games can be. However, open world games also do have downsides, and those downsides collide quite strong with some game mechanics and storytelling especially. Yet, a lot of AAA titles pretend that an open world game would be the guarantee for a good game. It almost feels like every game would need an open world. Indie games proving this wrong over and over. And in my opinion, we have too many open world games by now. I mean, just look at all those AAA titles here. All are upcoming or did just release. You can barely see any non-open world games in between. Most of them being indie titles, which I will mostly exclude from this video, by the way, due to them being more often than not passion projects and or more artistic in nature. Besides, an open world game is still a huge amount of work that is barely possible in an indie game usually. It's more of an exception among indies, I think. So my statement doesn't really apply there. And before you go heads over to change my mind, just hear me out real quick. Part 1. What is an open world game? So, like always, before we dive in, we gotta clarify some things. So, what is an open world game exactly? An open world game is a game that provides a world where you can go basically anywhere you want at any point of your progress. Or you can choose where you want to proceed first. Basically, you decide the route you want to take to complete the game. How freely you can choose, of course, depends on the game itself. Sometimes the game gets separated in chunks. In those chunks, you could move around freely and do whatever you like, whenever you like. And then you would slowly increase the radius of your map by progressing in the story, for example. The premise is that you can choose what task, quest, or path you want to take and when you want to do what. That means you choose how fast or slow your game would progress. Oftentimes, the world would be filled with various tasks that would keep you busy, like collecting items, side quests, and so on and so forth. An open world game is not bound to one genre. It can be an adventure, RPG, shooter, or any other game genre you like. But most often, open world games are associated with action, RPG, or shooter genres. So now that we cleared that, let's see how good they are. Part 2. Storytelling and timing. One thing that puts me off most with open world games is the story element. For me personally, a story is a very important element of a game. If the story is amazing, I can forgive most bad graphics. If the story is amazing, I can forgive repetitive gameplay. If the story is amazing, I can forgive technical issues. And most of all, if the story is amazing, I'll be intrigued. Sure, the importance of story in a game is relative to the genre and your very own preference. So most likely not all will agree with me on that. And don't get me wrong, I don't need story for every game I play as well, but I'm put off pretty fast when a game creates this fake image of a great story behind everything and then gets lost in an open world that just drains out the story. Good storytelling is very subjective, I know, but I think there are some disciplines one must master to create a great story. Natural, intriguing, and interesting dialogues, for example, would be one that would come to my mind right away. After a while, you would probably come to think that timing is important too. When to reveal what.
There's something you should know about me.
When to progress, when to rest. Timing is essential to create suspense and a real good catharsis at the end. In a movie or book, you have great control over the timing of your story. Your audience would only observe. You choose when you would reveal what. In a game, however, this is not the case. The audience is actively moving forward, deciding when to progress themselves. They can just stand around and do basically nothing for 2 hours straight, and you can't do all that much about it. While that can be brilliant and immerse the audience more than any other media could maybe, it also makes you lose grip of an important part of storytelling. After all, it's not so easy to build up suspense for an epic battle when you could just as well do 100 side quests that don't really involve the main quest all that much in between. I mean, just imagine how much time passes in between. Let's take an example. Imagine you came back to find your son and you woke up in a strange and new world and everything has gone to shit. And after months, you're finally able to reunite with your son. You finally know where you could find him, but you choose to help those random dudes because they are very nice and you build houses for them. And of course, a proper home needs decor, right? So, you need decor, I guess, and while you're at it, you're all like, oh no, I definitely need a fitting couch to that rusty wall over there. So you go on an unending quest on how to properly craft furniture. Then you proceed to master your furniture making skills and, oh look, there, what is that? Oh, I gotta check that out. Did you forget the sun yet? Because I certainly did. When the timing of the story is off, the suspense drops very suddenly, and that leads to a disconnect between the audience and the story. Now, I don't say that open world stories are all bad. There are certainly a lot that still get the timing right, and some games just have a different focus, and the story is more of a frame for your playground than an intense experience. And that is fine too. Not all games need that. But some games try to do both an open world and an intense story just to fail. There are a ton of games that prove that there can be an impactful story in a game without an open world that would still feel just as fun and feel just as free without the timing struggle and with much more focus. But not every game. So I beg for gaming companies to decide what they want and confess that sometimes an open world just doesn't fit the game. Part 3. Size is not everything. I mentioned before that it's not about size, but rather how good you can use the size of what you have. Did you ever look on a map and think to yourself, wow, that is so vast, but kinda empty? Take the Dragon Age series, for example. Dragon Age is one of my favorite series, and I love it a lot, especially for its story and, well, for Alistair.
Now that the warm, fuzzy part of the day is over with, we can get back to the ritual dismemberments. Oh wait, it's not Tuesday, is it?
I mean, seriously, this guy was my first ever crush. Not to be dramatic, but I would die for him. And in a way, I did. For some reason though, Dragon Age has always tried to be an open world game. In Origins, I think they achieved a good middle ground, letting you choose when to do what, while the maps that you could actually move around in were rather small and linear. Side quests were everywhere, and a lot of them were important to the world, plot, or for your party members. The game would also provide your typical go fetch quests, but they were never too overpowering, I felt. Dragon Age Inquisition, however, evolved this idea into much bigger maps, in which you can move freely. Too bad though, that there's nothing there. The main story has a lot of pacing issues that could easily be solved if you weren't running around an empty map for hours before you just did a huge thing, and the side quest storylines are often very, very lame.
Someone, anyone, please help my wife.
What's wrong with your wife?
She gets sick when the weather's foul. Can't catch her breath like cobwebs in her lungs. Our son Hindle makes a potion that lets her breathe. He's the only one who can make it, but he's joined that cult in the hills. Please, get to him and tell him what's wrong. Without that potion, she'll die.
The only exception being if it's a party member asking you for something. The map is filled with nonsense markers and side quests were rather, well, not interesting. More often than not, those quests feel generic and simply forgettable. And I came to think, what for? Why would I, the savior of the world, the chosen one, bother to get her some fur from those random-ass wolves that nobody cares for, when there is no significance to the main plot or the world building at all? As a player, I can't help but feel like an errand boy. And if I want to feel like that, I'd be actually doing some errands, because I could really use some money. But seriously though, what do you have this large map for if you're gonna fill it with meaningless and useless stuff that's neither especially appealing nor really entertaining? It just makes you feel like you'd walk so much in such a big world, but there's nothing there really. It's just kinda empty. And that leads me to my next point. Part 4. Time management and the pain of growing up. An open world game stands for a long gaming experience. Buying an open world game means to play that one game for at least 40 hours, right? What am I saying? I can spend hundreds of hours in those open worlds, right? I observed a phenomenon. Open world games are huge, time-consuming, and yet a huge portion of the gaming industry is actually made up of casual gamers. Casual because they cannot spend an entire weekend just playing this one game, because as painful as it is, a lot of gamers are adults that work, have families, their own project, or eventually don't have the time for such a big game. Still, from personal experience, I know a lot of people who would still buy game after game, but never finish them. And I'm guilty of that myself too. Games that I came to love, but eventually I had other things to do and forgot about the game, or the whole playthrough took so long that I can't possibly be really invested in the game anymore. And I mean, you know what I mean, right? When you're really invested in the game, when you're really in the game, when you think about it when you go to bed and it keeps you up all night, and then when you wake up, it's the first thing that comes to your mind. You cannot have that when you have pauses that are longer than periods of actually playing. I'm not trying to say that this would always be bad. I personally think that open world games that have less focus on story and more on gameplay are easy to pick up again, even after a longer break. However, when a game is vast but has no substance to it, it becomes frustrating. Because you know you could have your lovely 20 to 30 hour long game with no open world that you could get invested in, and that could provide the story and experience you wanted, but for some reason decides to sidetrack you with meaningless stuff that are not even entertaining. And that is just poor time management. You're just keeping the player busy in the hopes that they don't realize that they play a game that is just stretched apart to look like it had more content, when it really hasn't. And that bothers me a lot. When you go into a game, it's hard to know what you'll need, what strategy is the best. Do I need this side quest? Is it gonna pay off? Do I need to grind this? You don't know. I don't know. In a way, we get lost in meaningless tasks that are more distracting from the main game than anything. So, what is that for? Part 5. Conclusion. Calling games an open world game is like calling fruits bio. It's nothing but a nice advertisement buzzword that would make the impression of a big, vast world and an immersive gaming experience when, in reality, that can fall flat. Open world games are everywhere, and I think to evolve gaming, we shouldn't use open worlds just for the sake of it, but instead create games as a piece, as a whole, where all its pieces fit together. And if you want to focus on your main story, or you don't know what to put in your world aside of the main game, or when you don't have enough content to justify it, I'd prefer you don't make an open world game then, and create a linear gaming experience that fits your game. But what do you think? Will we not know non-open world games in a few years anymore? Will we leave non-open world games now to indie devs? Or could it be that I actually changed your mind? Let me know in the comments down below. A new video is going to be up next Wednesday, and I hope to see you there. Until then, have it good. Bye!